This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Infineon. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Wednesday, October 19th, 2022, and I'm here with Rob Conant of Infineon. Hi, Rob. How's it going?
Good. Great to see you again.
Good to see you too. So we're at October Tech here in Santa Clara, and I want to talk with you, and I think you also want to talk with me about decarbonization. And you know what Infineon is doing to make that happen, but also how does that impact consumers, right? My audience is the tech-savvy consumers, and obviously I'm sure that they're all trying to make life better for nature, but I know that there's a lot more we can do, and Infineon's committed to that cause.
Yes. I thought you were going to ask me about pretzels and beer being October Tech, but I think that's a better question.
Well, we can talk about pretzels and beer as well if you'd like. But I'm just kind of curious, like, how does Infineon see this and where does it fit in with consumers?
Yeah. So Infineon has been interested in decarbonization for a long time. You know, it's something that as a consumer, I think about. I'm sure you think about it as well. We, driving over here, see so many electric vehicles.
I drove in one, so yeah.
And so it's a big deal for people, and it's a big deal for our company, for Infineon.
Right.
It's a big deal for our customers, the companies that make products, and it's a big deal for consumers.
Right.
And so we see it not only as something that's important for our employees and our customers, but also for society. And Infineon, takes that seriously and takes that responsibility seriously.
Yeah. So, obviously you guys make semiconductors, and semiconductors, at scale, you can take steps to limit waste, obviously, right?
Yep.
But also you can create semiconductors that help manage the environment, right? Sensors. And of course, with the electric revolution, the EVs out there, and, electric trains, and now starting the electric aircraft for short distances, and hybrid boats and stuff. We're seeing obviously a need for more power electronics. There's something that Infineon is a business of. So obviously you're well placed to kind of cover a lot of these things. So talk us a little bit through what are those areas of focus, and where do you see the biggest growth is, and what matters the most to end consumers who might have an Infineon barometer in here or whatever.
So I think the way we think about it is you kind of have two sides of the carbon emissions.
Right.
The biggest is the generation side, right? Generating power. Mm-hmm. And if you look at our power grid, a lot of our power today is really, think about it as like industrial era power generation, oil, natural gas, basically burning things. And that's worked great, right? It's given us a lot of growth in the economies and everything, and life is a lot better now in so many ways because of these things. But but we're moving now towards more information age power generation sources, like wind and solar. Mm-hmm. People are saying by 2030 it'll be 40% information age power generation or electricity generation in the United States.
And California is in a good spot right now for that.
Yes, that's right.
I actually get my power, I pay a little more, because I just want to get my power from as much as I can from renewables. I think something like 90% or something now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and so now, even today in California, solar is economical. It's more economical than buying electricity from the grid.
Wow.
Because the prices on solar have gone down so much.
Right.
That's taking advantage of semiconductor manufacturing technologies and semiconductor power conversion technologies for the higher efficiency that we get out of solar panels, as well as just the economies of scale as this stuff has grown. And Infineon's a big part of that. We provide a lot of the
conversion is, as soon as you hear the word conversion, you hear loss, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And you want to minimize that, and you guys have the technology to do that.
Exactly.
Leaders in DC to DC conversion and power inverters and all that other good stuff. And solar panels, I like to be high voltage, low current, and then we need more juice. So all that good stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and then also people don't think about this as much, but the other is wind. We provide a ton into the wind industry as well. You have these massive generators, and that's all about converting mechanical energy to electrical energy, which is kind of the opposite of an electric motor that you'd see on an electric vehicle. We provide a lot of the power conversion components that go into those systems to convert that the rotating energy into electrical energy that we can then turn into electricity for the grid. And so we provide a lot of those components.
So like at a large scale infrastructure, power, like the inverter in your car, but the size of a room kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
That's
and
cool.
Increasing the efficiency of that a little bit has a really big positive impact. And then the other, so that side is the generation side. Of course, the other side is something that's even closer to our hearts as consumers. It's how we consume energy, right? When we consume energy, how do we consume it, and how much of it do we consume? And we work with a lot of different companies as well. EVs, obviously, a huge area for us.
But even just chargers for phones and laptops, the GaN stuff, gallium arsenide, and I was talking to your colleague about that. The more you can have universal chargers with like universal standards, like Europe, USB-C, you're getting economies of scale in terms of waste, right? Reduction, and environmental impact.
That's right.
Size and energy conversion is more efficient with GaN. So there you go.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. It's like smaller. It's lighter, and it's higher efficiency, which is better for consumers, but really better for everybody.
Totally.
Well, another area that where that same kind of a technology is used is kind of an interesting one that's behind the scenes for consumers. So, every time you do a Google search, there's a little bit of carbon dioxide that gets emitted from the data centers.
Server farms,
right? From the server farms. And I remember, 10 years ago or something, people were expecting that with the rate of growth, that data centers would be consuming something like 8% of our overall global electricity consumption.
Right.
But amazingly, we've been able to keep it at about 1%. It's grown over the last decade,
and
but it's around 1%.
And is just through efficiency improvements in the semiconductors?
It's not 100%. A lot of that is through better use of servers, more efficiency in the power, in the semiconductor processors themselves.
Well, of course.
Better power supply, like lots of different things that have gone
Smaller
into
nanometers, much more efficient, much higher clock speeds, all that good stuff that we benefit on consumer devices as well.
But the interesting thing is, so just data centers, 1% of the overall energy consumption, and that has to do both with the power conversion, so you're turning AC power into DC power,
or DC to DC.
But and when we do a lot of work in that area, we have these wide band gap semiconductors are much better at doing that efficiently. But the neat thing there is, if you do that efficiently, it actually has kind of triple threat, because you save the energy there. That stuff turns into heat, and so you save the energy in the cooling.
In the cooling, right?
And the other thing is, you end up saving a bunch of energy because you don't have to have these massive backup systems.
Right.
If you can save a little bit on save half on the backup system, that's a big deal as well. And so it's really been interesting to see how that has evolved. I read a stat recently that if all of the data centers adopted that wide band gap technology, we'd be able to power 165,000 homes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty
That's
cool.
amazing.
It's pretty cool.
I mean, it's the thing about power grids, and when you look at it's all about accumulative, changes, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about sensors, because obviously, we as consumers use cars, and whether the EVs or not, they are digitized. We talked about digitization with your colleague. It's all about sensing. It's all about providing more data to a computer system that makes our lives more comfortable and more, easier driving, etc., driving aids. And so my thought is, you're a huge player in sensors, right? Like whether it be microphones in phones, whether it be, pressure barometers, like whatever it might be, temperature, the millions of sensors that our phones use. It's not millions, but it's at least a dozen on most phones. Yep. So you guys have a huge presence in that. And I know you've been doing some really cool stuff in the rainforest.
Yes.
So walk us through this a little bit, because I wasn't sure if you were using mobile phones with additional hardware attached to them with custom or latest Infineon sensors, or whether you're using a completely bespoke solution like with a Raspberry Pi or something.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
This is something that's really close to my heart that I'm super excited about. It's so cool. I found out about this organization, I guess it's about 4 years ago now, called Rainforest Connection.
Okay.
And the guy who started that, a guy named Topher White, took old, outdated Android phones, started mounting them on the tops of trees.
Okay, so they're using phones.
They were
really
using
cool.
Android phones. It ended up, as this scaled, so mounting them on the top of trees, and when you're in the jungle, on the top of a tree, you can get a cellular connection, which is amazing.
Right,
now we're actually getting
up.
satellite connections also for those things that are really remote. But you also can hear everything that's happening in the jungle.
Below,
And that's the reason birds have calls is so they can find other birds like them in the jungle where you can't see more than 10 feet, but you can hear up there. You can hear for a mile.
That's amazing.
And it's really neat. And what they do is they put these things up in the rainforest. They listen to what's going on, and so they have microphones. They also have gas sensors, and they're typically solar operated, and they can hear different species in the jungle. Right. We've actually identified been able to hear 20% of the world's bird species from these things that are mounted up there. But we can also hear at miles away a logger.
Right. The equipment they use for logging.
Yes.
So chainsaws, the big machines as well, the big tractors or whatever they're using to drag the trunks and all that.
Yeah, you hear that off in the distance. And what the organization...
You can triangulate too, right?
They're able to do. Yes, they can ferret lines.
Yeah, because you got the multiple trees.
Yes, and then from that, what they do is they alert the local rangers who go out and enforce the laws.
Cool.
It's really amazing. It's amazing from the perspective of deforestation, identifying and preventing deforestation, but also the species identification. So they're now, a bunch of scientists are now using that data to figure out where the species are moving. A camera trap works for a 10-foot radius.
So you can also track the different species as they migrate, as they maybe are struggling, but perhaps they're being affected by our madness out there.
Yeah, and
that's really amazing.
What is the impact of building a road? What is the where are the migration patterns, so people can figure out more sustainable development processes.
So you guys are obviously using, like you said, gas sensors to probably measure the air quality, so you can tell if some kind of machinery, because most machinery is still using fossil fuels, right? Yeah. But you're also using microphones, and that's really interesting to me because microphones are becoming very critical. I mean, we're recording one here, a pretty nice Shure here. I'm sure it has some really nice sensors in it. But our phones are getting very, very good. I'm doing a backup recording with an iPhone here on purpose because their MEMS mics are really high quality,
really good,
and let you, deal with very loud sound levels and very quiet sound levels. Obviously, you make mics, and I think MEMS is like a deal breaker in the mic world. All the modern mics use MEMS, I think, now.
Yep.
And, is this the kind of stuff that you're using in the rainforest on these extra boards? Or are they using the built-in stuff in the phones? Is it good enough to use an old phone, or do you actually have to use special mics?
So we've moved from using old phones to moving to using specific bespoke platform, mostly for the reliability.
Right.
Because it costs a lot of time and effort to actually climb up these trees. I've climbed up these trees to the top of the canopy of the rainforest, and my palms were sweating when I was up there. You don't want to go up again because the thing got rained on, and so this stuff is in some harsh conditions. But from a sound quality perspective, the reason they're in the phones is because they're low power consumption. Mm-hmm. They're super effective from a quality standpoint.
Super wide bandwidth too.
Yeah, super wide bandwidth, high dynamic range. Like a lot of great characteristics of those microphones that make them suitable for that kind of application.
So we should wrap up, but I want you to tell us you have something special under your sleeve that you want to talk about.
So another thing that we're working on that's related to all these things is across is really data analytics.
Okay.
So we have some data analytics platforms we use so that companies making these kinds of connected products can understand what's happening with their products in the field to continue to make those products better. So if you think about and people don't typically tie that to decarbonization, but if you think about how do people know what to do? How effective is the work that we do? That is all driven by information and data. Right. And these kinds of platforms are letting people really quickly see where are their problems, where are their customer issues, where are their connectivity issues.
So if you say are like a manufacturer of smart home devices using Infineon products, as the manufacturer, you now can run software on your devices that let you improve your devices through the analytics that Infineon provides at the back end.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, and it eliminates connectivity issues. It eliminates bugs in the product, and ends up improving product performance.
And so, folks,
through AI.
If you agree to the terms of service, as long as they're not completely ridiculous, you're often agreeing to companies gathering that data anonymously to improve your product. So it's a fine line. I'm not going to tell you what you should do, but I know that as somebody who's worked for startups that do software, having some analytics that let you look at the quality of your product and how the new software and hardware versions are, improving your product, it makes a big difference. So consider at least, donating some of the anonymous data to to the manufacturers. That way they can benefit from your platform, right?
That's right. And
so this announced today at Oktoberfest then?
It will be announced tomorrow.
Okay, tomorrow.
Announced tomorrow. Yep.
Great.
Yep. Yeah, we're excited about it.
Awesome. Well, listen, Rob, thanks so much for being on the show. This was really helpful. I mean, we talked about a lot of things that I think people can kind of not just conceptualize, but actually sink their teeth into, like charging your phone with a GAN charger is going to make the world a better place, because that GAN charger can also charge your laptop, your headphones, and wastes less energy on heat or whatever else.
Yep, exactly.
And all the technology Infineon provides for transportation in itself right now is making a big difference with EVs and all that power stuff that you guys do. So thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it. And folks, stay tuned. We're going to have the rest of the show now with the news. And thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
And folks, we're back in the studio with Max Bonduono. Hey, Max, how you doing?
Great, Miriam. How you doing?
I'm pretty good. So we just did a segment with Infineon about decarbonization, which is interesting because you're like, what does that have to do with consumer tech, right? But I mean, it just goes to show how some semiconductor companies that make chips that are in every device we use, like sensors, they make a lot of sensors for the phones, are just trying really hard to change the way they run their business. And speaking of which, we have a bunch of news that we want to talk about. And, I feel like it hasn't been a very busy week, but at the same time, speaking of changes, like Moto kind of dropped a big one on us, Lenovo, I should say, with these rollable devices, right?
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
What's your take?
This is fascinating to me. I love weird hardware.
Me too.
I'm so into it.
Do you think this is kind of like TCL's been showing us these folding phones forever, and then they almost commercialized the Chicago, remember? Like, do you think this is just like, this is what we could do, or do you think they're actually really like, kind of like LG working on something they're going to bring to market? Because with Moto, like, I don't feel that confident that this would come out. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it was Samsung, I'd be like, oh, this looks real and finished. But
no, Samsung, if they were the one demoing a technology like this, which we should probably lay up, it's a rolling phone.
Right. But it doesn't roll like you think, though.
Right. It does not roll like you think. It seems to get taller with the press of a button, which is as bizarre as it sounds when I say it. But so if Samsung were demoing this, undoubtedly they would ship it, because they wouldn't demo it without shipping it. They're not the concept smartphone maker like an LG or a TCL is, where they can just say something like, yeah, we have this rolling phone, but we just won't ship it. Motorola is really interesting. Motorola has a history of shipping weird things. They had the Moto Z, which was probably the weirdest flagship phone you could buy in like 2016. Was it?
Yeah, the one with the mods, right? Was that the one with the mods? Yeah.
Yeah, that was I think it was the first review unit I ever got. And that was a very interesting phone to me. So like Motorola's no stranger to shipping weird stuff. And I feel like ever since LG left the market, there's been like that hole where, LG was shipping a lot of cheap phones, and then at the high end they were doing a bunch of weird stuff. They had the V20, which had like 2 screens on it. They had like weird features that were considered weird, like ultra wide cameras and stuff. But like Motorola kind of jumped in and did the budget thing where they're like, we can just ship a bunch of these budget phones. We're already good at that. We've proven that with the E series, G series from back in the day.
Right.
So for them to like, demo a rolling phone that gets taller and like changes its form factor, like I could see them like shipping this, because LG might even do the same thing. Like they could say, like obviously they have a rolling phone that they had demoed. They didn't ship it because they left the market earlier.
Right.
But Motorola could definitely like get away with something like this. Like they could just put it on the market, be like, here you go, everybody. But I don't know. It's a very interesting concept to me.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of, this kind of, we can't talk about this without talking about this LG phone that was pretty much ready to ship. Like it just blows my mind that now we saw the leaks of this person in Korea essentially unboxing the phone that this is real. Like, you know, it's not just that they were pre-production, they were production units.
Yeah.
And
it was ready to go. They just exited the market earlier than I guess
cannot
other
believe
people
they
thought.
didn't take these phones, at least put them out there for sale and just said, yeah, we have 10,000 and go just, you know, like they become collectibles, whatever. It is like a special edition, like, you know.
Right.
Wrap them in a boat,
did that with
sell them for $5,000. I don't know what. Yeah.
Right. They absolutely could have just made a couple bucks. They did that with the, if I'm not, and I could be mistaken, I'm not sure if I am, but I think they did it with the Velvet 2 with like their employees or something, and they sold them for like $400. So like they could have done that if they had production rolling phones. Like how sweet would that be?
I mean, that would be the holy grail. Like, I mean, you know, I love the Wing, but you know, would actually practically.
So did I.
Me too. I kept mine, by the way. Like, there's some phones that they're gonna go in the museum, basically. You know.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I feel like this was a missed opportunity, especially like if it was just a prototype, I would, or if you 100 pre-production prototypes, I understand. But it clearly they did a run of manufacturing, and where did these end up, in a landfill somewhere? That's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like wow, right? So going back to Moto though, I feel like this form factor that they're showing, which is not the, you know, vertical, you know, 20x9 phone expanding into a tablet, but is more like we have a tiny, you know, like compact phone, basically like a you know, iPhone mini format, or you know, the Xperias back in the day, the compact phones, but more, you know, with an aspect ratio that's more like 16:9, and we're now going to expand that to a 20:9 aspect ratio for a full-fledged experience. And the way that works is you can use it one-handed when it's in small, right? Because your thumb doesn't have to reach as high, and then you can use it, you know, two-handed, and you have more. That I think is a very interesting concept. It's kind of like the flip concept in a way, right? You know, more compact in your pocket, and then you get that extra real estate when you need it and want it. So I don't know. I'm bummed that LG didn't do their thing, but now I'm excited that Moto perhaps is not just showing us this, and maybe we'll ship something.
Right. And you know, if they were to ship something like that, they would not sell almost any of them. You know, I think if they didn't give review units out to media outlets might be the only one to buy one. You know, like they'll just blow their whole budget and be like, hell yeah, we have a rolling phone to check out and play with. But no, this is a really, really fascinating thing to me, because I don't know where the future of the smartphone lies. Like, everybody will tell you that it's foldables, but I'm not exactly sure if that's true or not. Like right now it seems obvious, but like, is it that everybody will just have a folding phone, or will we have like goofy phones like this that can extend from like 18:9 to 21:9 with the push of a button, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like they've got to come out with this thing somehow. Like you know, it just needs to happen. And I feel like we need the variety in the ecosystem. I think the problem with Moto is that they had such a bad experience launching the original Razer because it was not fully baked, right? That now they're kind of like, oh, you know, are we going to get burned by the media and all that other stuff, right? So
yeah,
I kind of understand where they're coming from. Like, they're cautious. Of course, like, we're just speculating here. Like, there is no indication that they're going to come out with this. They just showed us, right? Because they had like the Lenovo, whatever, the conference that they had. Yeah.
Yep.
But I want them to have the balls, as it were, to actually do this thing, make it real. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for.
It would be sick.
I know, it would be. So anyway, what about that laptop? Like, you wrote about the laptop on Matrodocs, and
yes, I did.
So I linked to your story, but I feel like you clearly picked that of the two to write about. So are you more excited about the laptop?
So anytime, I kind of have a rule in my head, anytime that Lenovo does something weird, I have to write about it.
Okay.
Because they just do weird things sometimes. Okay. They do, I think, some of the weirdest things in the entire world of technology. Like the X1 Fold is the most bizarre computer I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And but at least that one seems semi-practical compared to this one. this rolling thing just looks nuts. And I can't imagine that it's very portable. But it seems to extend from the base of the laptop, and it just gets really, really tall.
Like it gets almost to a square aspect ratio, right? From starting
a little bit more than a square, I would say.
Oh, really?
It
okay.
looks like, if you look at the end of the GIF, obviously audio listeners aren't looking at this, or I guess video aren't either. But if you go to the store and you look at the GIF that I include, you can see it gets a little bit taller than like a square aspect ratio.
Okay.
So it looks like it's maybe 4x3, but I can't exactly tell.
I think you're right. It's like 4x3 lens portrait.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And when it's fully extended, and when it's down, it looks like it's almost 3x2.
Right. So
right?
It seems a little bit taller than a normal 16x9, but it's kind of hard to tell because of how quick that the clip moves.
Yeah.
But boy, this thing just looks like so much fun to mess with.
I know. I'm just really hoping, like, I think we kind of saw this in the LG unboxing too, is that, we have the problem right now with the folding phones of the crease, right? And obviously, like Oppo with the Find N and, Moto with all the various Razers have kind of alleviated that to some extent by having more of a teardrop shape when it's inside the phone shut, right? It's closed up.
Right.
But whereas Samsung, has a more pronounced crease because they're bending the glass a little tighter. Every rolling phone I've seen, even in person at like various events, always has a spot, like a flat spot where, as it were, kind of, or an indent of some kind where when the phone is retracted, the screen is kind of bent in that space, right?
Yep.
So it kind of has a memory effect. And so like for those of you watching on Patreon right now, my patrons, thank you for the support because you get the video version ahead of everyone else. So if you guys want it, patreon.com/TNKGRL. So, I'm using my hands to describe this, but if you're doing the LG, which is like narrow phone and then expands, that narrow part, right, becomes the middle of the screen as it expands, right? And you can kind of, even on that unboxing video, you can kind of see that there is some kind of memory effect on the shape of the glass there. It's clearly not as pronounced as the crease in a Samsung phone, but I'm wondering how they're going to be able to get over this like longer term, because this, I think, is going to be the trouble, right? Like I actually store all my folding phones open on purpose to not put stress on the glass. Yeah, think about it, right? Like if you're using a folder or whatever every day, it's going to be shut, open, shut, open, shut. It's going to equal up. Like it's more shut than open, but it's got an equal opportunity. It's got more of an opportunity to be open.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have it in a box, like we often do with our review units, and you haven't used it in 3 months, that thing has been sitting in a box for 3 months. I'm not sure this is just me as my engineering brain working here. Like, I'm not sure this is a real thing, but my gut tells me that it's memorizing its shape, right? To some extent, because there is a plastic component to this, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, like, what are we going to do about that? Like, so I'm like, I don't want my Oppo Find N, which I love, to lose its, nice lack of crease. So I just store it flat. And it works because, like, when I use it, everything's just seems, and when you buy them, they're stored in the box unfolded, right?
Yep. That's absolutely right. I had my Z Flip 3, which was my first foldable, loved it. Got a Z Fold 4 instead. But I had it sitting in a drawer for like 6 months, I think, probably just like untouched. And I was afraid to open it because I had read somebody's Z Flip 3 had like cracked just from like leaving it for a week folded. And they just opened it up and the whole thing was just shattered. So I was like semi-worried. I was like, is this thing just going to like bust the second I open it up? And so I opened it and it was like totally fine. I think the only thing that happened, and I don't know if this is my mind playing tricks on me or what, but it seemed like the crease just got a little bit deeper from leaving it.
No, I don't think it's your mind. I'm sure that's happening. Plasticity is a thing.
It has to be.
It has to be. That's why I'm telling you, folks. Those of you, especially who are listening to this podcast, are early adopter, tech savvy folk. You're jumping SIM cards and phones a lot, and you probably might have a folding phone. Yeah, yes, right. Our people. You might have a folding phone in your arena. I'm saying to you right now, store them flat. Store them flat, open. And I think it's the same with these rolling phones. Once we get them, we're going to have to store them fully open so that there is not that memory effect. And I don't know. I mean, these are really minor quibbles. If they could, somebody, well, LG kind of almost did it, but if Moto could follow up on those footsteps and give us this phone, all I care about is like the software, whatever, like specs, I don't really care too much about that. I know the Moto software is going to be awesome. It always is. Right. And in this case, we don't have to worry too much about having a secondary screen like the original Razer. You know, obviously there was the potential for bugs and software issues with a secondary screen that had a custom user experience, right? This doesn't have that. It's just like you're resizing the freaking screen. So it's an Android supported thing. So whatever, this should just work. So don't give it like, can you just make sure that it's actually reliable in terms of, you know, a lot of people had problems with Razer, remember the creaking noise and stuff. Like, I kind of feel bad for Moto because they were the first and then they just tried to rush out a little too hard in the same way as the Fold, the original Fold that was recalled, right? Like,
oh yeah, I love that.
I want them to have it baked enough that it feels like, yeah, you know, yes, it's going to probably have issues with dust accumulating in things. And like, these are all things, as long as it doesn't break and it still works in a year, I think then they're won. Then they've proven that this can be sold. And I really worry that it's going to be Samsung or TCL or someone else that's going to come first, you know?
Yeah. With rolling displays, I think like somebody just has to be first, sort of. And I don't know that it would be somebody like Samsung. I know they were like some of the first to ship a folding phone, but it almost seems easier to do that than having something that rolls.
Yeah, for sure.
Plus, the advantage, I don't think, at least in consumers' mind, I mean, like we've had time to sort of think about whether we would want something that can extend to a longer shape. I don't know that it's in the consumer's mind, like what advantage they would have to a rolling phone, at least compared to like a folding phone. You know what I mean? Because like a Fold 4 can just fold out to a tablet. A Z Flip can fold down to be smaller. Like, why have a rollable phone?
Well,
like,
I think in this
case, it might even seem gimmicky in a sense.
Right. In the case of LG, it's clearly the same concept as the Fold. It's like you have a normal size phone and it expands to a tablet. But in this thing, I think it's you have a small compact phone that's one-handed usable that expands to more screen real estate when you need it.
Yeah.
And I think you can market it that way. And you know, if you see if you see how successful the Flip is compared to the Fold, in my opinion, it sells more. People seem to be more excited about it when I show it to them. The Fold, they're like, oh, it's big, and do I really need an iPad when, you know, and I get it. Like, I'm personally also in that camp that, like, I appreciate the Fold for what it is, but it's not for me, right? I don't really need that. It's nice to have that level of real estate, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that.
Yeah.
So the Flip is I think much more appealing to people because they can relate. Like, it's open, it's a phone. It's closed, it's a compact, right? So this is a little harder to sell, but I still think that the wow factor is there. And with LG, I think the challenge was that the wow factor was there, but it was a harder use case to sell. Because again, I think the Fold today is a harder use case to sell. Not to our audience, or you and me, but to the average. And I think for Moto, one way to justify this would be to kind of like wow the general public, right? In the same way as they kind of wowed the general public with the Razer, but then it fell apart. Yeah, somewhat, sometimes literally, you know. So, and I think this is why we're not going to see this from Moto, because they got burned so bad with the original Razer. Part of it was their own mistakes, right? And part of
it wasn't built as well as a Z Flip. It didn't have like the software. It didn't have the features, and the hardware was just all
and
over
also
the map
they didn't persist. They didn't persist in the same kind of authority with the same authority as Samsung. Samsung also screwed this up really bad on the original Fold, but they recalled them, came back and said, "My bad. We fixed everything. Here you go." And the first gen was kind of meh, but by that point, we were able to gain their confidence again, right? Like, we were able to say, like, okay, this is actually okay. It's not great, but it's better. It's working now. The flaws are taken out. Whereas I think Moto, when the first signs of this creaking and stuff started happening, I think they should have pulled the plug. They should have said, okay, you know what? We're putting a stop sale on this. We're going back to the drawing board and we're making it better. And then when we come back, it'll be, because remember the second one, the 5G model was completely perfectly baked. Like, I kind of feel like that phone did not get the love it deserved. Except from Michael Fisher, right? Mr. Mobile loved it. But like, I mean, because it had fixed all the flaws. It had 5G, it had OIS on the camera, it had a better processor, and more importantly, the folding part didn't have any issues. And so I'm like, in the way they did it, but they didn't like come out guns blazing like Samsung did. And I think the other thing that screwed them up really big time is that, of course, the original Flip came out in between the two.
That's what killed them.
How do you fight on that?
Right. Absolutely. You can't. It's kind of impossible. Motorola had such an interesting opportunity to resurrect a beloved brand with like the most bleeding edge technology that you can get. And they just screwed it up. The first one had problems, and then the second one came out in like a press release, and nobody really cared about it except for Michael Fisher. You know, like there were other reviews that came out, but nobody gave it the time of day.
There was also a problem that they didn't give us review units.
Also that.
Because they were afraid,
weird,
because they had been burned so bad. And so Flip is out. We are loving it.
Yep.
Right?
And then everybody has one.
Yeah. And they come out and they don't have review units, and this was their opportunity to come out guns blazing, because technically they had a 5G phone before, because the Flip 5G, I believe, came just after the Razer 5G.
I think so too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Right, because they redid it later that year, and they put the new chip in it, and it was the same phone essentially, just with 5G. In the same way as in many ways the Razer is the same phone with 5G, but they fixed a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And again, you know, I think this is a problem that I see with Moto all the time, which is that this allegiance they have to Verizon is what's causing the problem. I want to remind everyone that the original Razer was a Verizon-only phone, right? That it did not have a SIM tray. It was eSIM only. For those of you who are bitching about the iPhone 14, okay? I mean, I'm not a fan of the eSIM only, okay? I think an eSIM and a SIM slot, one of each, like the Pixel do, is the way to go. But the point is, like, this 5G Razer was an unlocked phone with a SIM tray, folks. Remember that. And so it seems Moto never puts the marketing push behind any phone that's not a Verizon special. But it's catch-22, right? Because Verizon messes with them. Verizon always asks them to decontent their phones or make them worse, right? Every time a Moto Edge of some kind comes out, they overprice them unlocked, so we pan them for the overpricing. The phones are actually okay, but we can't be positive about them because the price point is not competitive compared to Samsung or Apple or even OnePlus, right? And then they announced it on Verizon, and of course the price is great, but by that point the reviews are out and nobody buys the phone. And also Verizon's like dropped the RAM or the storage or something to meet that price point, and we're all like up in arms and our pitchforks come out, right? Like, so because they didn't have a marketing push from Verizon on the Razer 5G, I don't think that they felt it was an important device. Yet it was their comeback. It was their chance to say, hey, look, Samsung did some cool thing. We fixed our Razer. Come and get it. But no, nothing. Yeah. And then, of course, they do the Chinese Razer, like the current Razer, the 2022.
Biggest L Motorola will ever take.
And they didn't launch it here. Like,
I totally disagree with this whole strategy. It's terrible. Like, what a terrible idea. Have a launch event. Have people out. Like, get this new Razer in people's hands. Like, let them know that you're there.
I know.
You know?
And
just ridiculous.
I heard rumors that Verizon didn't like it, and that's why it didn't come to the US. And this is what I'm talking about. It's like, Moto, again, balls, okay? Like, stop it. You can't just have, like, Verizon is your partner, but considering you have been a phone maker as long, even longer than Nokia, okay? Like, you should have a partnership with every carrier that's of equal quality And every phone you make that's more than $500 should be available on all carriers. I mean, if freaking Google can do it, like, where the hell are you, Moto, right? That's kind of what I'm talking about. And so this is kind of the chicken and egg I was talking about, the catch-22 I was talking about before with, the original Razer and the Edge phones, is that, who's going to buy a phone as good as it is from Moto if it's only on Verizon? Verizon people, when they go on sale in the discount bin at the Verizon store and they don't want to spend the money on an iPhone or a Galaxy. That's what's going to happen. And that puts Moto in the eye of the public as a third tier brand.
Yeah. There's a lot of it that comes down to branding, I think. Because Motorola, I don't think it has the same gravitas as Samsung does. So like if you see a Z Flip next to a Razer in a carrier store, which one you gonna pick? They both fold, they both have a couple cameras on the back, they both have screens on the front. And like they do essentially the same thing. So you're gonna pick the Samsung because Samsung is
Samsung.
It's Samsung, exactly. Whereas Motorola was hot, for a few years with the original Razer back in the day, but like nobody cares about that brand anymore. Like I feel like that's sort of their reality. And you can blame it on a number of factors, but
I agree.
They focus so heavily on the low end that it's almost a budget brand at this point. It doesn't have the same pull as putting a Samsung logo on it would.
100%. But I think there's more to it than that. I think that this Verizon crutch that they're using all the time is it's a negative feedback loop. It makes them worse because they're letting Verizon, because they don't have the cloud. That's
part of the reason,
right?
Yeah,
they don't have the cloud, so Verizon is their crutch, and then Verizon dictates things that make the product worse. So it's a negative feedback loop. But at the same time, I feel like if they only just worked on, I think the brand still exists because, as you said, Moto is still strong in the budget mid-range area with the G series in the US, mostly by selling through prepaid bundles, right?
Yeah, you get it for 99 cents with an unlimited plan.
Yeah, their unlocked prices on their G models are too high, in my opinion. But nobody buys the unlocked one, right? So it doesn't matter. But my point is, it's like if they just kind of shed that crutch of Verizon and just said, okay, we're not as big as Samsung or as Apple, but we're still a known familiar brand to the Americans, to the public, to North Americans, to Latin America. They're super hot there, right?
Yep.
Why don't we just sell our phones unlocked but at a lower price so that the reviewers are happy and give us some praise that say that we're at least competitive, and then let's work with T-Mobile, let's work with AT&T to also launch these unique experience phones like the Razer or even the Edge, the original Edge Plus, remember? That thing was flagship all the way. It was absolutely competitive with the I think it was 20 at the time, S20 Plus. And,
I think so. Yeah.
And I'm like, you completely bunged that launch by making it Verizon exclusive. That was your savior flagship phone. That was the phone that we all unanimously agreed was going to put you back on the map when we saw it. We're like, Moto's back.
Everybody was pumped. Yeah.
And then Verizon only, well, you're screwed now. You're screwed now, Moto. Verizon only, as soon as you say that, you're screwed. And I know you say that we have to do that because that's the only hope break that paradigm in your head and start making phones and putting them on a pedestal with a big marketing push. But here's the thing. They're owned by Lenovo now. And Lenovo doesn't operate that way. Chinese companies don't care about North America.
Yep.
That's the problem. It's never going to happen because Lenovo will never let them do it.
Yeah. It's a really tough spot to be in for them. I actually think they should stop with the $900 phone game and just stick to 7 or 8. Max out at 8 and target the Pixel 6 and iPhone 14 and call it a
absolutely
day, or Pixel 7,
or make a OnePlus 10T competitor in that price range.
Yep.
That's just as compelling.
Charge $650 and include all the flagship specs you want.
But look, the
hertz,
Edge, right?
The whole nine.
The Edge this year, right?
Yeah.
It's great, I think, overall, except it has the same price point as the 10T, and then it has a MediaTek Dimensity 1050 in there. No, it's the first MediaTek Dimensity chip with millimeter wave. Kudos. And I'm not panning MediaTek. I love their stuff. They're a sponsor of the show too. But it's just like, I'm just saying, like, you compare a $650 OnePlus 10T with a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 to the same price unlocked Edge, right? You're not going to buy the Edge. I'm sorry, you're not going to buy the Edge, right? Like
the 10T got way too much hate. It's a great phone.
It's a great phone. I agree 100%. But here's the thing: I think the 10T, they just marketed it wrong. They should have marketed it as a gaming phone. It would have been done.
Totally.
Really.
Totally.
But the thing is, you look at the Edge Plus earlier this year, and I was like, this is totally, absolutely Samsung S22 Plus competitor. But you completely screwed up the price. It's $200 too high.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
But that's the unlocked price. If you go to a Verizon store, it's very competitive. But who goes to a Verizon store? When you go to the Verizon store, you're going to see the Samsung. You're not going to buy the Edge.
Yeah. Nobody's paying attention to it. They can have the biggest booth in the store, and they'll be like, where's the iPhones? Where's the Galaxy? Yeah, they don't care. Nobody cares. It's a shame because Motorola is very capable.
Exactly. We're big fans.
Yeah. I've been a fan of theirs for years. They just never get to like they always come up short somehow. They invent new ways to come up short. Like I'm convinced they just sit around and think about, boy, we could do this, which would be the perfect smartphone launch, and we would sell millions of units because we know how to do it. Or we could just do what we've done for years and screw it up somehow. And for some reason, they always decide to screw it up. So I don't know. I pray that one day, you know, they sort of regain a reputation where they are a solid competitor to Samsung, to Google, to OnePlus, and take some market share back in the high end space. Like, they're already killing it in the budget because of LG's departure, but like, do something in the high end, man. Like, you could, like, they're capable. It drives me nuts.
This rolling phone, rollable phone is perfect proof of that. Like, this is Moto at its best. And now please deliver it.
Weird, man.
Please bake it and deliver it. I know the software is going to be relatively easy on this one. It's the hardware reliability that's something to deal with. Please, like, as you said, doesn't look like Samsung is going to do a rollable anytime soon. You have finally a window of opportunity to do this, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It can't happen, like, you know, in sync with the Chinese market. It has to be a North American thing, focused on North America, with the 3 carriers on board, not just Verizon. Like, this is your opportunity to redo the Razer folding phone, but right.
Yep.
And your window is going to be shorter and shorter the more you wait, because the competition, you know. Here's the good news. If Samsung doesn't do it first, it's going to be Huawei or somebody like that, which doesn't matter in this market. So at least you have that, right?
Yeah, they can say they at least did it first.
You know,
it would be wonderful. By the way, I was just thinking, you know, there's like only one big disadvantage to having an expandable phone.
Yeah,
which is cases. Like, how would that work? How would that work on a phone like that?
You might have to go naked.
I assume you would. I don't know how it would work.
I think, you know, if the parts of the case that are, you know, kind of joined together when it's rolled down would be protected. And as you roll up, you would expose the parts that are hidden, basically. But
there would be like a weird, like, middle piece.
Yeah, there'd be a middle piece missing. Yeah, exactly.
No,
the middle piece
like that
wouldn't even be there. It'd just be empty there. But
would it?
Yeah, but the corners is really what you want to protect. It's really the most, right? So as long as you protect the corners, I think you're probably okay. But the reality is, like, in the same way as a folding phone, like, you know, you're gonna have to be a little more careful, I think. Although I have to say, the Z Flips, at least, that I've played with, all of them have been very, very rugged. Like, surprisingly, actually.
I don't think I can shake the feeling of being more protective whenever I carry a folding phone. Like, it's sort of instinctual, where you're just like, I don't want to get this thing near a body of water. I don't want to take it to the beach.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's that kind of thing. Whereas, like, Fisher will literally throw his foldable phone in like a pile of sand and be like, here you go, guys. See, it still works.
Yeah,
he just won't care. He like throws it around everywhere.
But that's the true test, right? That's what real people do.
Oh yeah.
So
well, that's what he does.
We're a little more careful, and I think it depends. Like I think some people just take care of their stuff differently than we do, right?
Yeah, totally.
But let's see. Let's talk about the iPads because we've been talking about phones that turn into tablets, and Apple just launched a couple of iPads. Now, there's nothing too exciting here. Does anything stand out that makes you kind of go like, "Oh, okay, this is cool"?
Absolutely not. I think.
I think
I don't want to be that negative, like because they are. I'm sure they're all great iPads, but like compared to what? Compared to 4 years ago when the first iPad Pro launched. Right. But like it's not gonna do anything different. Like I think the only new piece of software is like DaVinci Resolve, right? Like,
that's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah. Which yes, it's very interesting, but it's the only like piece of software you could see using the power of an M series processor. Yeah. Everything else is iPad stuff, which can runs great on my A12X and my 2018 iPad Pro.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it still flies. That's 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So I like how much
this is very iterative is basically the way I see it. I'm a bit bummed that they didn't do the mini LED or whatever on the smaller size one. That's what I was hoping. And of course, the hover feature that Samsung's had forever on the Note phones is going to be probably very helpful to people who do artwork on the iPad Pros, because you can tell before you put the pencil down where you're going to be painting or drawing. Yeah. And I think that is nice for like as you're touching stuff up. Wi-Fi 6E, whoop-de-doo. I guess finally we've got some Wi-Fi 6E from Apple, 2 years in?
Swell. Yeah.
It doesn't even exist on their laptops. So it's kind of like, what? It's interesting to me, actually, that the M2, this is an M2 chip. I have an M2 MacBook Air, and my M2 MacBook Air doesn't have 6E. What?
It doesn't have 6E?
I don't think so. This is the first 6E product from Apple, I'm pretty sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. The M2 Air has 6E. I could be wrong, but that seems odd that they would include it on an iPad first.
MacBook Air M2 Wi-Fi 6E. I'm Googling it.
What do we got?
No, Wi-Fi 6.
Oh, really?
ABG-NAC. Yep.
So this is the first thing with 6E then, unless the iPhones have it.
Yeah. No, it doesn't either. Basically everybody's saying this is the first time we're seeing here. I'm going to put in iPhone 14 Pro Wi-Fi 6E and see what happens. No, Wi-Fi 6.
Wow. So the iPads get it first. That's an interesting move. I didn't realize that until just now. Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, it's interesting in the sense of like, kind of like you. Wait, what? That wasn't already there.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's, we're at Wi-Fi 7 now. Like, every time I talk to folks at Qualcomm and MediaTek, it's like, Wi-Fi 7, Wi-Fi 7. And it's like...
They have moved on. Bluetooth 6, Wi-Fi 7.
Yeah. Look, I can't get too excited about... I'm not an iPad person. I get the iPad, though. There's a great app ecosystem if you're a creator. I love the idea of DaVinci Resolve, though. I think the idea of editing video on a touch device that's portable is really hot.
That's definitely very appealing. Like, I can see that. That sounds very exciting.
Like, I'm not quite there in my workflow. Like, I'm a laptop workflow person. So that's why I've got the MacBook Air M2 that can run the DaVinci Resolve just fine. I mean, you want the Pro if you really want to do like a lot of 8K or like tons of 4K footage mixed together. But for the basic editing that I do, the M2 Air is overkill even. So then there's a regular iPad, right? Like,
which is far more interesting to me than the Pros.
Yeah,
sure.
And I'll link to your story in Major Docs about it. What I like about it is this is the first iPad base model that looks like a Pro or an Air. Like, it has that thin bezels, no home button. Like what we've seen on thin almost bezels. Every Android tablet that's come out of China or Samsung for the last few years. Basically, once I have to give Apple kudos for coming out with a form factor that I think is really sexy looking, like the original iPad Air that then became the iPad Pro and now is the iPad, where you have this metal slab with glass, and it's got this, the slab size like the iPhone does now too, and it has this relatively thinner bezel, still something you can hold on to enough to not touch the screen, but doesn't kind of like that big band top and bottom like, the old iPhones and the old iPads did. And looks more modern, and I like that design. And I'm glad that they finally brought that down to, the base iPad. And more importantly, folks, this is big deal to me, is the base iPad now has USB Type-C. So every iPad in the lineup, right? Every iPad in the lineup, other than the 9th gen, they're still selling the 9th gen with Lightning, has USB-C. And the thing though is $450. I mean, I know we're running, right now the economy, supply issues, inflation. I kind of get why it's a pretty nice looking device, and I kind of get that they're charging a lot more than the old 9th gen. But that's all, like, I don't think I could justify buying that. Like, you're halfway to a MacBook Air here. Like, just save your money and just buy something really productive. I don't know.
Yeah, if you want an iPad of this caliber, like the Air is just sitting right there at $150 more. Not that you get a ton more, but it's like, this iPad's like so oddly positioned. I was talking to Jay Kroll over at the street before all of these launched, and we were just like kind of like taking guesses like what would happen. And I was like, well, if they do, like the bigger screen, the more powerful chip, maybe a 2nd gen Apple Pencil support. Obviously, that's not here. But with all those changes and upgrades, I was like, they have to increase the price. And he's like, no, like they can't. And I was like, I know they can't, but like they will.
They will.
And
yeah, exactly.
I didn't know it was going to be this much. I thought they were going to boost it to like $399 and like just get rid of the baseline $329 and call it a day. But at that point, it's still a great deal. But it's $449 and they're keeping the $329 9th gen iPad. So it's such an odd product. And like the camera is on the side, whereas it's not on the Pros. And I don't understand it.
Like, that is weird, right?
Yeah, I tweeted that, and I had a bunch of people yell at me saying like the magnets on the side of the Pros where you stick the Apple Pencil, like that's the reason why you can't have the camera there, because there's interference somehow. Makes sense, but maybe move the magnets somewhere else. I don't know. It's just weird to me. It's just so weird to do it on this iPad. Like, it's not there on the Air. It's not on the original. It's only on this one. Like, why on this one? We're not making video calls on other iPads. It's just bizarre to me.
It's very bizarre. But hey, back to the pricing, like $249 for the keyboard folio. Like, ouch.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? That should be $100.
Yep. It should be $150 at the most. Because 100's like too generous for Apple. Like,
this is my point, right?
They would have to charge the Apple tax here. But $250.
This is $700 now for the thing with the keyboard.
Yeah.
And you don't need, like, you're $300 away from an Air.
I know, yeah.
A MacBook, that is. Like,
yeah, totally. Like,
I understand
it's such a weird product.
Like, to me, like, if you're going to go that route of putting the folio on it and getting the pen, as you said, get the Air, the iPad Air, or even an iPad Pro, and actually really use that as a pretty solid laptop replacement. But if you buy this to just do what most people do, which is like surf the web and watch Netflix and YouTube, I wouldn't say buy a Fire tablet, because I don't think they're that great personally. But that brings me to the Redmi Pad, because the Redmi Pad is a device that was announced by Xiaomi at the same time as the Xiaomi 12T and 12T Pro. Earlier this month. They sent me one, and I was like, whatever, tablet. And then I unboxed it, and I just started using it. And it's like $250 or something, maybe $300. And it's essentially what the 10th gen iPad is. Same size screen, metal, all metal with glass front and very small slim bezels all the way around. But it even has a 90 hertz IPS LCD. And it's powered by, definitely not as fast of a chip as the iPad. We're like Helio G99 here. It's a Wi-Fi device. But honestly, like, if you're just going to watch Netflix and surf the web and do YouTube and, maybe some social media, on this pad, whatever, tablet, you're going to not need more than that. And I don't think you need to even be in part of the Apple ecosystem at that point, right? Like for totally that kind of use case, get that. But as soon as you start doing more like creative stuff and more, professional, like stuff that requires you to like be productive, I think that then you should go to an iPad Air or an iPad Pro and call it a day, and maybe not have a laptop anymore, or just buy a used MacBook M1, even like Air M1 is totally. It's such a great product for the money. So I don't know, I don't see how people can justify, unless they're wealthy and they don't care, like this price now is too high, right?
Right. It absolutely is for $450, and plus it comes with 64 gigs of storage, which I don't think is enough for anybody, at least in like 2022. I mean, like you need at least 128 to get anything done, right? Like if you want to save movies, maybe download some ebooks or something to read, like that storage is going to be eaten up very fast, and your only other option is 256, which is at what, $599?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
So at that point, you're at the iPad Air, right?
Yeah.
And there's like a cellular option for this iPad. I wonder what happens if you max it out. I never did this.
Try it right now. Let us know what you see.
Let's see. Let's see. I'm going to pretend to order one of these new iPads, and I do like the colors. I think the colors are kind of fun. Let's see. Blue, 256, Wi-Fi cellular. So far I'm at 749. I'm going to add an Apple Pencil and the Magic Keyboard Folio. I'm at 1,097.
And you're still, wow.
Isn't that nuts? Hold on. I'm going to add another $9. $1,106.
What did you add for $9 though? Are you pushing it too far?
The adapter for the Apple Pencil, the USB-C. I forgot to click the
add. Right, because the Apple Pencil, it doesn't support the newer pencil. It doesn't
charge anymore, which is like the greatest thing on earth. Like Apple's so stubborn, they have to keep this first-gen Apple Pencil around. They will literally sell you a $9 adapter to charge it. That's great.
God. That is hilarious. Great. I just love how, like, that's the most Apple move of all time, it feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, just totally Apple. They just, Apple's top designer or something just resigned today.
Oh, really?
It was the guy that replaced Johnny Ive. And everybody's like, yeah, I guess he did resign after this disaster of a product release with this adapter. Like, yeah, it totally makes sense. Nobody wants this. I'm not going to use this. This is terrible. Like, if I'm going to buy an iPad, I'm buying one that supports this second-gen Apple Pencil.
Yeah.
Like, this first-gen Apple Pencil has to go away. Like, it uses a lightning port. It has to go away.
This is insane to me. It's just insane.
Isn't it great?
iPad's
$1,100.
As you were talking, so is why I'm actually coming to realize that, oh, right, it doesn't support the Pencil with magnetic charging. Gen 2, it supports the original. The original is still Lightning, and you have an ice. Oh my God! Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
All right, let's move on to another tablet. It turns out that Razer Edge is really a tablet with a kind of gaming grip around it. I thought this was going to be a fully integrated, all-in-one device.
Yeah.
And I can't really find a photo of it without the grip, so it's kind of like hard to picture what does it look like. And it's also small enough proportion-wise that I think it's smaller than the Nintendo.
Yeah, it looks like it. It looks
bigger
like
than a phone, but not that much bigger than a phone. Because what's the screen size on that?
6.8 inches. So it's literally a phone.
It's a phone. That's what I thought. It's more like a phone. But of course, it's thicker because it has a fan. It's actively cooled. I just think this, I'm not into this, but I think it's really fascinating.
This reminds me of the Fire HD 6 that was around. Do you remember that tablet?
Yes.
It was super thick and it was kind of small and it looked like a phone, but not really. That's what this reminds me of, just with like two controllers on the sides.
Yeah, it does. It does kind of like remind me of that. I just think it's really cool because, last year in Hawaii, I got to see kind of like a prototype version of this thing. And it was a different form factor. It had the grip integrated and also...
Oh, was it integrated? Interesting.
I believe so.
They
I'm
might
trying
have
to
just
remember.
changed their mind.
maybe I'm wrong. Like, just don't quote me on that, but I kind of feel like it was integrated. And so this is, Snapdragon G3X Gen 1, which is this essentially very much an 888 plus evolution, but with a fan for fan application for gaming specifically. And so I love that in a way. They took the concept of the gaming phone and kind of stubbornly dug themselves in and ran with it we're not going to even have a back camera. Like, it's like, I'm saying, like, you can buy all these different gaming phones from like the Black Shark, and all the others, right? Red Magic comes to mind. But this is like, you're still going to have a phone, maybe even an iPhone or something. And then you're going to have this thing, which is pretty much a phone, but without a back camera. It still has a front camera. And you're going to put this on the grip from time to time and just play games on it. And wow, this is very fascinating. And the price is right. $400.
Oh, totally.
For what you're getting, I think is for the Wi-Fi only version. By the way, there's a 5G version that includes millimeter wave support. I think Verizon's going to be probably selling us with millimeter wave.
Yeah, more than likely.
Does the controller come with it? That's the question. I hope so.
I think it does. I can't imagine that it wouldn't, right? Like, it comes bundled. Yep.
Okay, cool. So this thing's like, it's got me super intrigued. Like, again, I could be wrong, but I think the one I saw last year was fully integrated, and it was like, that's a little bulky. But this, because you can separate it, you can probably still like use it kind of like you would a gaming phone. And that to me is very interesting. And, nice display, all the specs you need. Very, very clever. Very clever.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated by this uprising of like portable gaming consoles. I've always been a fan of the idea of the Terminator. It's totally an uprising, right? Like, they're just kind of emerging from different places at this point.
Yep.
But I am the first guy to tell you I am not a gamer by any means.
Neither am I.
The most that I play is like Super Mario Run on my iPhone, like occasionally if I'm just waiting for something. Like, that's all that I do.
Yeah.
So, but like, I always like the idea of having a console like this, just like on my backpack if I want to just like play something like a Switch or whatever. But it seems so interesting to me. I really love the way that the market is heading.
Yeah,
I think for portable gaming stuff.
This is super so cool. Like, and at the price point, and in knowing that's a Razer is really kind of like pushing all the right buttons.
It is Android 12 though. I imagine somebody's going to get mad at that.
Somebody will, and it is a bit egregious, but whatever. I'll let it slide because ultimately the hardware is what matters here the most for this form factor, right?
I wonder if this 5,000 milliamp hour battery is going to be enough to power everything for very long.
I think it should be okay. This is a pretty efficient chip. Yeah. I think it'll work.
Just seems kind of low to me almost.
Well, you're not using this as a phone. Device. You're not using this as a phone, right? It's not like replacing your phone. You're going to pull this out when you want to play a game, and then it's going to be enough, right? Nintendo Switch, right? Like, it's the same kind of deal, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. It just seemed kind of low to me, just with everything it has to power, like the fan and stuff like that, but
that shouldn't take that much power. We've seen the Red Magic with the built-in fans last pretty decent.
Oh, that's right. That's
life,
right.
So,
Yep.
Moving on, because we need to wrap up things. I want to really talk to you quickly about the iQOO Neo 7, which is a Vivo sub-brand iQOO. And the reason I brought this is, there's lots of great Chinese phones that come out that we'll never see. But this has got me excited because MediaTek Dimensity 9000 Plus, which I think is the first one we've seen with that chip. And you look at the specs, 120 hertz AMOLED, 120 watt fast charging, 50 megapixel main camera with OIS. It's a IMX766, which is a good one. You've get like, basically all the tasty goodness of a premium mid-ranger or a affordable flagship here. If you look, and the design is pretty hot, which has always been true of Vivo and iQOO. But then you look at the price and you're like, holy crap, like this is amazing. $373 for the 8128 trim. And even the higher 12512 trim is $456 US. Now, keep in mind, these are Chinese prices. And if it was coming to the West at some point. It might come to Europe. It'll be $100 more or so. But even at $450 or whatever, if you the base model, like that would be an incredible package. Like these things
totally
are Vivo phones generally are well made, and the IQ sub brand is the same. And the designs are always on point. And you look at the spec sheet and like it has an 8 megapixel ultra wide and a 2 megapixel useless sticker cam macro, but so does the OnePlus 10T. Okay. So the point is, I think that this flies. To me, this is interesting because it shows what we're missing out on, this incredibly competitive mid-range. And this is not a mid-range chip. This is their flagship chip. So, for MediaTek, it's about the equivalent of an 888 from Snapdragon, from Qualcomm. So, like, this is a pretty tasty, delicious little nugget, as it were.
Oh, absolutely. Like, this phone is definitely like the epitome of just like max out the specs and call it a day and charge a low price. I love it when companies do that, because it just creates such interesting products. And it can start a whole trend. I mean, like OnePlus has been on that trend for years, and they only recently started, increasing their price and stuff just so that they seem like they're on the same level as Apple, Samsung, Google. But this IQ, I mean, like I love the 120 watt charging. Like that is sick to me. 5,000 milliamp battery, Android 13. Like it is.
I mean, they're basically
really
undercutting. They're undercutting the Xiaomi 12T here in terms of price, and it's in the same ballpark in terms of specs.
That's a big deal.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Max, we have to wrap up. Do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet? I know you write for CNN_ as well, and you have Matrodocs, your own website. But tell us where people can find you on the internet.
At Legendary Scoop, just about anywhere. Twitter, Instagram. I'm trying to do TikTok, so we're going to see how that goes.
Good luck.
But Twitter is the main place. You will find random thoughts. You will find news, all that good stuff.
Awesome. Well, folks, you should ping me and Max on Twitter if you want to discuss this podcast. I'm at Tankgirl on Twitter and Instagram. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book character. Just drop all the vowels and you'll find me. And look at my Instagram. It's got pretty pictures of phones, of cars, of travel, of food, or whatever else. Mostly taken with cool phones, so check that out. The podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on all the major platforms: Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts can be found. And if your app lets you rate or review the show, please consider doing that. There's a couple of YouTube channels you should check out, and you know how YouTube works. So like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the little notification icon, all that good stuff. Comment as well. The channels are youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast and youtube.com/mobiletechmore. The first one is mostly phones and wearables and personal audio and all that stuff. And the second one is kind of all the peripheral ecosystem, home automation, car tech, whatever else I'm going to get my hands on, travel tech. So check that out. And you know how to use YouTube. So the next thing I want to really kind of bring up to your attention, we mentioned it halfway through the show, is there's a Patreon. If you want to help me make this podcast happen every week, please consider joining Patreon. There's a bunch of cool tiers there. The first one, I think the main one that most of my patrons are on, is the video version. You get a video version of this podcast where you can see me and my guests. And, we sometimes have phones to show and stuff. But more importantly, you get it a couple of days before the audio version. You get it ahead of time. And it's more raw. I don't edit it as much. You get a little bit more of the kind of the experience of as we recorded it. So consider that. There's also a perk where you can join me in my Discord and chat with me, and Discord server there. There is also a bunch of other things you can check out. So please consider joining the Patreon. Patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. If you don't like Patreon for some reason, I get you. I've got a PayPal link in the show notes. You can click through and you can donate whatever amount of money you want. Maybe buy me a coffee for $5 or something. I want to thank our sponsor this week, which is Infineon, right? Infineon is a top 10 global semiconductor solutions provider and a leader in smart, secure, and connected devices. They've been our sponsor before, and we really like having them on. I hope you enjoyed the discussion around decarbonization this week and that it brought you some new perspectives. I want to thank Infineon again for being my sponsor this week, and you, Max, for being my guest and nerding out about the rollables and the Motos and all that. That was fun.
Yes, that was amazing. Thanks for having me on, Miriam. This has been great. I loved it.
Absolutely. You know I'll have you on at some point again in the future. And folks, you also know that I'll have a show next week. So please stay tuned for that. And until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.